For nearly 80 years, the Met Gala has been heralded as fashion's biggest night, with some even calling it the Super Bowl of fashion. The event serves as a fundraiser for the museum's Costume Institute, but it's also a way for the editors of Vogue magazine to dictate what they believe to be, well, in vogue. It's a very unique view through the lens of Vogue's top editors into what they perceive to be the pinnacle of art, culture, sports, tech, and so much more. This exclusive evening takes place at the museum on the Upper East Side. While the red carpet creates one of the most watched spectacles in the world, the actual details of what happens inside the gala are not very well known thanks to a no cell phone policy. Today, we are going to chat all about the Met Gala. I'm going to tell you more about the history of this event, and we're also going to talk about some things to keep an eye on in 2026 that may be slightly controversial. Before we get into all things Met Gala, first let's do a little create and consume, as we do in every episode. As far as what I have been creating in the last week, I actually was away in Florida last week with my dad, so we did our first ever father-daughter trip together, and it was honestly so nice, you guys. We went to West Palm Beach, Florida, because my dad is a lifelong Mets fan, and we thought it would be really fun to do a spring training trip. I almost really just tumbled right on over those words, but I made it through, surprisingly, to see the Mets in action before the season started. So we got to see a game that they played against the Astros in West Palm Beach, and then we also rented a car and drove an hour north to Port St. Lucie, Florida, which is where the Mets' home stadium for spring training is. All of that to say that I ended up creating a mini vlog of us attending the game on Friday. So that is up over on Instagram and TikTok now. I will leave a link to it in the show notes if you'd like to go watch it. And it was really fun to get to see the team in action before opening day, which I believe is actually today, if you're listening the day this episode comes out. And it was really fun to explore Palm Beach. We had a lot of great meals. I do want to create a West Palm / Palm Beach blog post, so maybe I will mention that in next week's episode. I still need to sort through all of my photos and everything from the trip, but hopefully that will come up soon. And it was really nice to experience a change of scenery and also some warmer temperatures. And as far as what I've been consuming this week, so I got home Saturday afternoon from the trip, and Saturday night my friend Charlotte came over and we had like a 5 hour long like just marathon catch up because it's been way too long since we last both got together. And Andrew was actually up by his brother in Rhode Island over the weekend because it was our nephew's birthday. So on the drive back down, he decided to do one of his long runs for marathon training in a state park that was kind of like on the way back. So I basically had all day Sunday to myself. And when I tell you, I sat on the couch and watched the entirety of season 4 of Bridgerton, most of it Sunday, and then a little bit whatever I had left on Monday, like within a 24-hour window. I cannot recall the last time that I like binged something so quickly. You know, the Sunday after a trip, it's like I did do my laundry, I did my Trader Joe's grocery shop, and after that I was like, let me just lay and let me just watch TV. And it was absolutely glorious. I do have to say, Bridgerton does a fantastic job of getting me invested into storylines that I wasn't even fully aware of could exist from previous seasons. Like, I've always had a soft spot for Benedict because I do feel like he was always kind of misunderstood or just, you know, like not really fully seen by certain people in the show. So I was really excited to see his storyline play out. And I was really surprised at how quickly I really came to care even more for him and obviously for Sophie also in the way that the story was interwoven together. There was so much buildup, honestly, for their story. And I think that that made it still really exciting to watch and made me kept saying like, okay, like, yes, next episode, next episode. I did finally get the pop-up on my screen that was like, are you still watching? And I was like, play again without asking. How dare you, Netflix? Like, of course I am still watching. I am here. I'm invested. And I need to know what happens. And I honestly, it's been a while since I've watched the earlier seasons because I've never rewatched a season of Bridgerton. And I only watched the first few episodes of Queen Charlotte. I think I maybe had downloaded it for a flight and then like never really finished it or went back to it. So I feel as though I should watch that next so that then I can officially give you my ranking of the Bridgerton seasons, because Season 2 always is at the top for me, like when I think about it, but I really enjoyed this season too. And even at times when I was like, where are they going with this? Like, all of my questions eventually got answered. I thought it was so well done. I also loved that Penelope still felt like a bit of a main character in this season. Like, I love her so much. I'm not as into her storyline in season 3 romantically, but like, I care so much about her as a person that I'm like, maybe that was one of my favorite seasons. If you have a favorite season of Bridgerton, let me know what it is. And I do think I'm going to restart Queen Charlotte and like watch that all the way through too, because I've heard great things about that one. And as always, you guys can always let me know what you are creating and consuming too. You can send an email to the podcast email. You can leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. All the ways to get in touch are always in the show notes. And I want to hear from you. With that taken care of, let's get into the topic of today's episode, which is, of course, the Met Gala. And when I did this episode last year, it was one of my most popular episodes ever. So it makes me really happy to know that you guys care just as much about the Met Gala as I do. I feel like just as someone who grew up loving fashion, and then once I moved to New York for college, I just became very acutely aware of like all the little details that went into making a Met Gala successful. And if you guys want, we could potentially do some other offshoot episodes. Like, I will plan to do a recap after the Met Gala actually happens. But if you want to hear more about like the art and curation behind the Met Gala or the history itself, I'm going to give a quick history right now. Let me know, because like I could talk about this stuff all day. The first ever Met Gala was held in 1948 at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York. And it was hosted by Eleanor Lambert, which this reminds me, I still also need to watch Love Story on Hulu, which is the JFK and Carolyn Bessette Kennedy story. But Eleanor Lambert was a New York City-based fashion publicist, and she was pretty instrumental, I would say, in raising New York to the degree of fashion capital that like Milan was and that Paris was. And she really wanted people to take fashion in New York seriously. And, you know, back at that time, a good majority of American clothing was actually being made in the garment district in New York City, compared to who knows, honestly, what it's shrunk down to now. It's definitely less than like 1 or 2% of all clothing that's made here. One of the things that Eleanor Lambert did to try to garner more attention and bring attention to American fashion and New York City-based designers specifically was to host a biannual press week where people could come and like look at collections and get to know what was going to be in season and what people were working on making for the upcoming months. It was really a chance for designers to showcase their work and for industry insiders like buyers and editors, etc., to come in and actually see things up close and to get to learn more about the backstory, the inspiration behind these collections. And this is a tradition that we actually still have today, now called New York Fashion Week, which, as you guys know, if you've listened to any of my Fashion Week recap episodes, I typically attend Fashion Week every year, both in February and September here in New York. And it is a great opportunity to get to see clothing in person, understand trends for the upcoming season, learn more about what inspired a designer to create a certain collection, and get a front row seat, ideally, if you can get a front row seat, to seeing what things actually look like and feel like and how they move. And I think that, you know, those in-person events and those moments for connectivity and to be able to just like really be in the presence of clothing and to understand more about it is really key. So the fact that Eleanor Lambert had the foresight to do all of this back then is really impressive. And the fact that we still have it today and that it has become what it is now of New York Fashion Week is really impressive. Now, another interesting thing about the first ever Met Gala, so now we're back in December 1948, is that it was actually an intimate dinner held at midnight, which, you know, I will say, if the right invitation landed in my inbox for a midnight dinner, I would consider it, like if it were related to something as monumental as the Met Gala. But in general, please do not invite me to dinner plans if it's later than like 7:30 p.m. I think that might just be my cutoff now personally. But honestly, that just sounds like something right out of an amazing novel from the 40s, right? Like, oh, we're having a midnight dinner, and it was an exclusive guest list, which obviously still is the case today. So that is what the first ever Met Gala looked like. And we don't have too many more details about the ones that kind of preceded that, but the next big kind of milestone in terms of Met Gala history that I think is worth noting is when Diana Vreeland took over in the 1970s. Diana Vreeland, who was the editor-in-chief of Vogue for that era. When she took over, she started to introduce themes for the Met Gala, which I think is probably one of the most defining characteristics of the Met Gala today, is everyone is always like on edge waiting for the announcement. What is the theme or the focus of the Met Gala going to be this year? So that was one big change that she instituted. And the other really big change that she instituted was she moved the function to the museum itself. So like I said, the first one was held at the Waldorf Astoria, which interestingly enough has just reopened recently in the city. They did like a very long renovation of that hotel and that property. So kind of interesting that it just recently reopened. But the fact that the Met Gala was moved to the museum itself gave a whole new opportunity, the same way that like for New York Fashion Week, when editors and buyers could come to see clothing up front, this also gave the opportunity for the event to really tie in a lot more directly to the art and the museum and the identity of the Met itself. And in 1995, Anna Wintour took over to host her first Met Gala, and she made another substantial change, which was moving it to the first Monday in May. And if you know anything about the Met Gala, you know like this is always the date that the Met Gala is now. They made a Met Gala documentary a couple of years ago called The First Monday in May. I actually really do recommend it. I will see if I can find a link for where you can stream that and put it in the show notes, because I kind of want to rewatch it too now that it's been a few years since I've seen it. But I remember being pretty impressed with it. I remember seeing interviews with like Andrew Bolton, who's the head of the Costume Institute, and other people who were involved in the process of actually bringing everything together for the Met Gala. And it does give you a pretty good indication of all of the work that has to go into that event. And I'm sure so much has changed even since they shot that movie originally, which I do kind of want to look up what year that was. Oh, okay, so this was a 2016 film, so 10 years old, keep that in mind. And I guess that means it would have followed the 2015 Met Gala exhibition, which was China Through the Looking Glass. It is coming up in a lot of places. It's coming up on Apple TV, Netflix, so hopefully it is available to stream somewhere then. And yeah, I would say this is one of the most well-known dates in New York, the same way that you might avoid taking an Uber around Soho during New York Fashion Week. You also probably are not trying to go out to dinner on the Upper East Side on the first Monday in May. And if you guys go to the Met's website and look at their hours of operation, it'll tell you that they're open basically every day, and it'll show like all of the holidays, you know, like Christmas or New Year's Day or whenever that they're closed. And it also always says the first Monday in May. Looking at the calendar right now, first Monday in May this year is going to be May 4th. So I will likely have a recap episode up for you guys the following Thursday. So be sure to subscribe and follow along with the podcast if you want to come back for that episode. If you don't know too much about the Met Gala, like I mentioned earlier, the Met Gala is first and foremost a fundraiser for the Costume Institute. And from my understanding and what I've read over the years, this is pretty significant because this is like the main source of funding that the Costume Institute gets for an entire calendar year. It seems pretty separated from the rest of the museums, like galleries and exhibitions and the divisions that exist within the Met, which I don't think people really understand and realize like what a huge organization the Met is. I mean, between all of the exhibitions that they currently have on, between all of the research, the preservation, the storage of all of the pieces that are not on display, like we're talking massive, massive infrastructure within the Met here. And it is interesting that the Costume Institute is funded separately through this event, but the money raised through this event is quite substantial, to put it lightly. In preparing to do this episode, obviously, I said I need to Google how much money did the Met Gala raise in 2025 last year. $31 million. That's so much money. That is so much money. And what's crazy is it seems as though they are able to continuously like break the previous year's record every time that they do this. I mean, I don't know if that's a cause of inflation or larger donations or a whole other combination of things that my tiny brain cannot compute in my head. But that is so, so much money. And as far as cost and price breakdown, individual tickets to the gala start around $75,000, according to my research, and a table of 10 is around $300,000. And to give you a sense of how this works, so if you think of celebrities who have attended the Met Gala in the past or who are kind of big known players who attend, let's just pull Sabrina Carpenter as an example. Sabrina, my girl, is not just like handing over $75,000 of her own money to buy a ticket to the Met Gala, because that's not even really exactly how it works in terms of invitations, guest list, and who is invited to this event. The way it typically works is that brands will basically buy out a table and then they will invite and dress celebrities who they want associated with their brand. So when people ask who a celebrity is wearing on the Met Gala red carpet specifically, there is also a connection there that goes deeper than just the brand dressing them. That means that they were invited to the event by that particular brand. That's often one of the reasons that you'll see celebrities walking with their designers too. One of my personal favorite pairings and examples of this was Aubrey Plaza walking the Met Gala red carpet with Stella McCartney in probably 2023, I want to say it was. So similarly to how this event is a reflection of what Vogue considers to be the forefront of fashion, art, architecture, all of those things, this is also a chance for brands to think about who they want to be aligned with and associated with, because a photo from the Met Gala lives on forever. So if you are inviting a celebrity to an event with you like this, you are really investing in them just as much as you are donating the money to the Costume Institute's yearly budget. So it's always really interesting to see which celebrities attend with which brands, because, like I said, it really also signals an alignment of aesthetic and values and shared interests in a way that is much more substantial than like your average red carpet. When we think about brands who invite celebrities as a reflection of their aesthetic and values, and the Met Gala itself as a reflection of Vogue's aesthetic and values, I actually think Vanessa Friedman, who's the fashion critic for the New York Times, summed it up best. She said that the Met Gala is really a reflection of Vogue's world view and who and what they see as important in fashion, art, social media, film, and all of the related industries. Now that we have a better understanding of the history of this event and why it's important in terms of fundraising and who's invited, let's talk more about what this year's gala in 2026 is going to look like. This year's Met Gala theme is costume art, and according to the description that I read, it is going to explore one central idea: how the dressed body appears everywhere throughout the Met's collection, no matter which gallery you're in. I think this is a very interesting choice because I think this is actually a fairly academic theme. I think it relates a lot more to the history of fashion and the history of costume and art and all of these things and how they tie into one another, which is really interesting because I feel like other times the Met is influenced by more external, kind of currently trending factors. And I'll talk a little bit more about how themes and dress codes have been selected in the past and what some of the common kind of recurring themes have been over the last few years. So I am into this because I think this is going to require celebrities and their stylists and the designers that they're going to be working with to be a lot more introspective and really find key references and historical influences for what they are going to actually be wearing on the Met Gala carpet. And I'm never really quite sure why they feel the need to add a dress code in addition to the theme. I personally think that the theme is like what it is and you can dress around that, but they do typically also provide a dress code. So this year's dress code is fashion is art, which, again, I personally feel like most people attending this event would dress the same for this as they would for costume art. I think you would probably draw some of the same conclusions, but for whatever reason, this is the dress code. And I think this is a pretty open ended dress code and open ended theme, too. Like, I am actually going to be very curious about what the exhibition itself will entail. But I think that fashion is art is also, like I said, a great opportunity for celebrities, their stylists, and the designers to take references from certain periods within art history. I could definitely see people tapping into different time periods in art history, from pop art to Rococo to Surrealism to Modernism, Baroque, Renaissance. Like, we have a lot to work with here. So, we may see some more obvious references, and I think we also are going to see, just even more than usual, a very high level of craftsmanship and attention to detail on the red carpet, because when I think fashion is art, aside from the literal interpretations, I also think about haute couture, high fashion. I sorry for my French. I took Spanish in high school. You know, like really, really detailed beading, feathering, stitching, just like impeccable high fashion shit, for lack of a better phrase. So I think that there is going to be a very wide and broad interpretation for this event. And I think that's also what makes part of the Met Gala red carpet viewing experience so fun, is that it is very, very subjective how heavily into the theme someone chooses to lean. And I always have the most fun when celebrities just dive on in head first and have fun with this. I mean, especially this exhibition, it feels like a great chance to have a lot of fun here. And how are themes typically selected for the Met Gala? Usually it does tie into some cultural institution or something that is going on. So this one actually feels very evergreen to me as far as themes go. When I think about last year's exhibition, which was Black Dandyism, that felt very intentional. It was the last Met Gala that Anna Wintour was hosting as the editor-in-chief of Vogue. I mean, she's gonna be there this year. She's still very heavily involved, but I think as far as her Vogue editorship goes, she really wanted to choose something that would kind of be a symbolic and legacy making move for her, which would be to highlight a, kind of overlooked area of art history, and specifically within Black dandyism, to potentially make up for some of her not being super inclusive over the years in her editorship at Vogue, to kind of end on a note of saying, I want to choose to spotlight this particular time period in art and this particular era of fashion. So I think last year was just interesting to see what she wanted to go out on with her Vogue editorship. And then in terms of Met Gala themes throughout the years, when we look back since Diana Vreeland started instituting themes in the Met Gala, there are kind of a couple of other categories that I've noticed that tend to repeat themselves or pop up again from time to time. One being exhibitions honoring late designers like Karl Lagerfeld in 2023 and Alexander McQueen in 2011. Can I also just say, Alexander McQueen's Savage Beauty, that I'm pretty sure is the first Met exhibition that I went to the Met to see in person, and I cried through that whole thing. I truly think Alexander McQueen was one of the most like genius designers ever, and I am continuously blown away by his portfolio of work. Like, every time I look back on just his design and his concepts and his creativity, like I simply may never recover. Like, he was truly like a singular designer in my eyes. Other times they will choose themes reflective of specific moments in culture or history. Like, I would say Camp in 2019 fit that bill, and also Heavenly Bodies in 2018. That was a really interesting one. And sometimes a Met Gala theme will reflect a specific region or culture, like China Through the Looking Glass 2015 and America: An Anthology of Fashion. That was the 2022 Met Gala theme. Okay, so as far as the actual guest list itself for the Met Gala, we really don't know up until the day of the event. It is typically kept very secret, although there are people who get invited back year after year that you could probably expect to be in attendance. So we really just have to speculate there. But a couple of people who we know for sure will be in attendance are the co-chairs and the host committee members. Okay, let's talk co-chairs, because the day this was announced, I started getting comments on a lot of my old TikToks and Instagram posts talking about the Met Gala who came to kind of see a video that I had previously made about Met Gala co-chairs. Beyonce has been announced as one of the co-chairs for 2026. Oh my God. Beyonce has not attended a Met Gala in 10 years. I have missed her dearly, and I am so excited to obviously see what she wears, but also hopefully to hear from her a little bit, especially about this theme, about costume art, about dressing the body. Like, she probably could teach her own masterclass in this. And I am obviously thrilled with this pick. I mean, I am beside myself excited for that. And of course, the other co-chairs, Nicole Kidman. I mean, I'm so excited for her outfits always as well. Venus Williams and Anna Wintour, of course. Okay, and then as far as the host committee, which is, I think, still important. I think the co-chairs really get the spotlight during the Met Gala, but when we look at the host committee, we have two co-chairs, Anthony Vaccarello, designer, and Zoe Kravitz, and some other members of the host committee this year. It would have taken too long to list them all. I can put a link in the description somewhere where the full list is, but Sabrina Carpenter, Doja Cat, Gwendolyn Christie, new Vogue editor Chloe Malley, and more are involved in the host committee department. And as you can see, this is a pretty interesting mix of legacy celebrities, also new up-and-comers, people from different industries within the celebrity entertainment industry. I mean, music, Beyonce, acting, Nicole Kidman, sports, Venus Williams, Sabrina Carpenter, and Doja Cat, who are in the host committee, I feel like have had some of the most iconic Met Gala looks, even though they both have only started attending, I guess, in the last like 5 to 10 years, if I'm remembering correctly. And as I mentioned, we won't know the full guest list really until the event itself, but I am also always interested to see who from the influencer industry gets to attend. Emma Chamberlain has historically been someone who Vogue has invited to not just attend the event, but also host their live streams. I know Addison Rae has attended in the past, so I'm interested to see who else from the creator sphere we will see at the Met Gala. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what might look different at the Met Gala this year, as well as what's got some people mad online, which let's get into it. So, Anna Wintour for this year has quote unquote stepped back from her editor-in-chief role at Vogue, but she is still a co-chair. She is still, from what I can gather, heavily involved at Condé Nast in, I'm not even going to pretend to know what her new title role is, but she basically is still in charge, is what I've gathered from this. And Chloe Malley may still be overseeing most of the editorial content at Vogue, but as long as Anna is still there, I don't know how Vogue can ever truly depart from Anna's overall vision or aesthetic. With that said, I expect that we will probably see some red carpet interview with Chloe in the Vogue live stream. I don't know how much Anna is planning to say or show face other than what she normally does when she walks the carpet, but rest assured, she's still heavily involved. I don't see that changing anytime soon unless she ever formally steps back from Condé as a whole. And another new development for 2026 is the Met Gala has some new lead sponsors this year. Maybe you've heard of them. Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez Bezos. The Bezoses, if you will. So, how did the Bezoses get involved in the Met Gala? I think we can trace this back at least a year because Anna Wintour did invite them to the 2025 Met Gala. And according to some sources, she was pretty involved with helping Lauren choose her outfit because I think that her taste has been described as maybe not the most high fashion that we've seen. So I'm pretty sure she was helping her on that. Obviously, they had their huge wedding last year, and I don't know who first reached out to who, but it is interesting that they are going to be the lead sponsors for this year's Met Gala. So obviously, if they are sponsoring an event, I'm curious what type of influence that is having behind the scenes, and we may not get too many details about that, or it may be fairly obvious. I don't know if we're going to start seeing, I don't know, Amazon ads and things within the Vogue live stream. I mean, Amazon, I feel like, has kind of tried and not really succeeded over time to incorporate more high fashion into its commerce. I think that that's not really its customer base and what its customers want. Okay, so Amy Odell, who I consider the authority on all things fashion news and also all things Anna Wintour, she wrote Anna the biography, and she also has a wonderful Substack called Back Row where she writes a lot of really thoughtful long form fashion features about stuff just like this. So I will put links to everything of hers in the show notes, and please also follow along with Amy for Met Gala coverage. I'm sure she's going to be doing a lot of it, mostly probably on her Substack, but probably also on her Instagram as well, if I had to guess. So she wrote a piece for her Back Row newsletter this month in March titled "Tech Billionaires Are the New Kardashians." And I think that this is a very helpful framing to kind of understand a bit of the thought process and the involvement of Jeff and Lauren for the Met Gala this year. A couple of key points that Amy touched on in her article that I thought were worth mentioning is that, you know, as a collective, I think it's fair to say that maybe we are not the biggest fans of tech founders as Americans, but we are very heavily reliant on their products. And you could argue this for someone like me, who's a content creator, who is very reliant on platforms like Spotify, platforms like Meta, Google and YouTube, Pinterest, like all of those things are very intrinsically linked to my business and my ability to make money. Similarly, we might be reliant on products like Amazon Prime and delivery because maybe you live in a more rural area where you can't just run out to a local drugstore, or you can't necessarily get, you know, your medication as quickly as you might need it, so you use their prescription service. Like, it is possible for two things to be true at the same time. You can obviously disapprove of billionaires and some of these tech founders, but also find yourself unable to escape using their products at the same time. I think that's actually probably something that a lot of people think about and struggle with. And it is interesting that tech people seem to have decided that they want to be involved with fashion. And I mean, first of all, it's about time, right? Like, some of the outfits have just been giving nothing. But to go back to the Kardashian of it all for a bit, because I actually really, like, when I saw this comparison, a lot of things started clicking for me. Kim attended her first Met Gala in 2013 and had her first Vogue cover in 2014. And Amy wrote in response to, you know, Kim's involvement with Vogue, at the time, people were disgusted and threatened to boycott Vogue the same way they were when Zuckerberg showed up at the front row of the Prada show, or when the Bezoses were announced as the major Met Gala donors alongside Saint Laurent. And she went on to write, "Finally, we will learn to live with and eventually tune out the narrative of tech people being fashion celebrities, the way Kim Kardashian and basically every member of her family became fashion celebrities." And I think this is so interesting because, first of all, I totally agree with the fact that I, in a sense, feel like I've kind of tuned out the Kardashians. Like, at this point, when I see them show up to events like the Met Gala, I'm not surprised to see them there. If anything, I do kind of expect to see them there. And at this point, it does really feel like a fleeting moment on the screen. Like, okay, what was Kim wearing? What was Kendall wearing? What was Kylie wearing? Okay, and we move on. Unless there's some of the rest of you are hiding back there waiting to walk the carpet, which is sometimes the case. I feel like Khloe and Kourtney have maybe attended at least once each. I'm sure Chris has attended before, although nothing's coming to mind right now. And I have to say, I've never been like a deep follower of any of the Kar Jenners, but they've also never irritated me the same way that I think they've irritated other people. If anything, I think they are all very smart and successful business owners and entrepreneurs in their own way. And I feel like they have honestly turned a couple of key moments into whole careers and generational wealth. Like, there's a lot to admire about the strategy and the execution of a lot of what they've done. And I also think this is an interesting reflection of how certain industries that have previously been seen as uncool or maybe even trashy to some extent, like reality TV, are honestly a solidified part of how we consume content and are more well respected now than maybe they even were in previous years. And I'm talking about something as low stakes as, maybe it's not low stakes to them, but like as simple as, like Maura Higgins and Rob Roush, who were on this past season of Traitors, and all of the recent opportunities they've had just from being on that show, all the way up to, you guys, a fucking reality TV star is the president of the United States. Like, how could we say that it doesn't have any influence or that it doesn't matter? And no matter what your feelings are about the person in the White House right now, I think I've made my feelings clear many times on this podcast, but just in case you need a refresher, I am vehemently against it all. You can't ignore the power of just recognition, popularity, fame. All of these things have deeper influence than just people seeming omnipresent on social media. It can turn into real businesses. It can turn into the situation we find ourselves in right now as Americans. Again, I'm interested to see how things go this year, if we actually notice any tangible differences between the funding in the background and the actual appearances by, Jeff Bezos. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg makes an appearance again this year. Hard to say. I do think it'll be interesting to see how noticeable the impact is of their financial backing and also what the impact is of their attendance at the event. And I will be curious to see the evolution of how quickly we learn to live with them and tune them out, as Amy says. And also in this newsletter, she spotlighted a comment on the Instagram post of Mark Zuckerberg attending the Prada show with his wife that he shared on his Instagram account. This comment is from a user named Mr. Freedom Nantes, I think. And here is what this commenter said. Is it me, or is everything I once admired, revered, and aspired to is rotting before my very eyes? From once supermodels to fashion's Bible Vogue magazine. Does anyone remember when fashion was about art, not commerce? This is a race to the bottom. What's next? Melania Trump and a Dolce & Gabbana ad? Now, this comment to me on Mark Zuckerberg's Instagram photo is so interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, this user has so accurately stated a question and topic that is probably on a lot of people's minds right now, that also just so happens to be the theme for this year's Met Gala. Costume art is the theme. Fashion is art is the dress code. Does anyone remember when fashion was about art? That is one layer of this, but the other layer, if you want to build an irony sandwich with me here, is the rest of that comment was, does anyone remember when fashion was about art, not commerce? The fact that Lauren and Jeff Bezos are the lead sponsors for this event is almost contradictory to fashion is art, because is that not saying fashion is commerce? Honestly, so many questions here, and I love open-ended questions like this just for me to think about myself, because it's not that often that I get to do a ton of critical thinking these days in the world of scrolling and just continuous consumption of everything. So I figured it would be nice to just leave with a couple of closing thoughts, like some open-ended questions. Can we ever really separate fashion from commerce and just have it exist as art? I mean, even going back to Renaissance era and thinking about the Medici family and how they were such heavy patrons of the art, there is so much art one would think that would not exist were it not for patronage, were it not for sponsors, were it not for support. I'm even thinking about Rebecca Minkoff. I mentioned this in the New York Fashion Week recap episode, which I can link in the show notes if you guys didn't get a chance to listen to it, how she talked on another podcast about how they would really only do Fashion Week if there was a sponsor to cover the overhead cost of what it really took to do a good Fashion Week event. The Met Gala is expensive. Hosting a Fashion Week show is expensive. If fashion is not generating the numbers from just the fashion itself to support these events and bring this notability and this visibility to fashion, then are we just supposed to go without it? Are we just supposed to create nothing? Or are more people willing to take financial backing, get some support so that they can create and maybe create with a tiny bit of influence from the financiers, but maybe also be able to create fully independently and really execute their visions. I mean, the Met Gala in and of itself is a fundraiser for the museum. So, yes, fashion is art, but in this case, fashion is also a huge, huge funnel of money that the Costume Institute relies on every year. I really think that it's always fascinating how the Met Gala does not just reflect culture, it influences what happens next. And I do think that is the reason that it still has all the eyes on it and the relevancy that it does after all this time. So you guys will have to tell me. I really, really do want to hear from you on this one. If you have any thoughts about how these things are all interconnected, if you're excited for this year's theme, if you're not excited for this year's Met Gala because of everything we just spoke about, please reach out, leave comments. We want to hear from you. We want to have a discussion. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will talk to you all again next week.